This is stocks above their 50-day moving average. Down at the bottom, when everybody was saying we were going to crash, I told you we had single digits, and I told you we were bottoming. Now I told you to be watching for a divergence developing here. One reference point of a divergence, we're likely getting another now here. Soon mark a peak. Momentum's turned back to bullish, but the upside is likely limited. We had a massive move since when I called the bottom. I called the bottom on April 7th, the day we were supposed to have the Black Monday crash, when everybody was telling us we were going to crash. I told you we were bottoming. That was one of the reasons why. Stocks above their 50-day moving average. The thing with stocks above their 20-day moving average, we have single digits. I talked about this back at the time. We've had this one divergence play out. Luckily now, the S&P make new highs. We're already forming a triple divergence here, moving up here. So you're getting multiple reference points of negative divergence. Likely going to give us a peak in the coming days ahead. The S&P make a new high and reach the trend line I've talked about. It's going to top out. We'll get the pullback I've been warning about. You know, I just got two things to say in 3 words. I was right. Back in 2024 and early 2025, again, I was predicting that 2025 would be the year that the U.S. and Israel would join forces and strike Iran and destroy their nuclear program. I was correct. I got a lot of flack for saying that. I got attacked over and over again, telling me how that would never, ever happen. I didn't know what I was talking about. That I was correct. When it happened, I told you that it was going to end very short, in a very short amount of time. That the United States and Israel were going to do this, and it was going to end in a few days, maybe up to just 2 or 3 weeks at the most. That over and over again. I had again people attack me over and over and tell me there's no way this was going to be a regional war, going to escalate into World War III, and I told you there's no way that's going to happen. The media told us, oh, that's going to escalate into a regional war, and again, everything the media says is completely wrong, and the opposite always ends up happening. These people have absolutely no credibility whatsoever. I told you the strike was going to happen, predicted it would happen in 2025. I was off. I told you I thought it would go into August. And later we found out, after the strike had begun, why it had to happen immediately, and that was because Iran was within a couple of weeks away of getting a nuclear weapon. We now know that from intelligence that was released. Now, it's not rocket science to figure this stuff out. It's common sense. With geopolitical issues, a lot of times the market will get rattled by it for a little while. Other times the market shrugs it off. I've talked about that over and over again. The market shrugged this off. But I knew that this was going to end in a very short amount of time because I thought it would end with peace through strength. Go in and strike. It would end. Do what they got to do. And this would end. And again, it was telling us this was going to go on and on. Regional war, World War III, and all the rest of it over social media that was being said, but I was attacked for that. But again, I've ended up being right. Back with the tariffs, again, people said that no one was going to come negotiate. People came and negotiated. I told you Trump was going to pause the tariffs. I was right about that. People said, no way China's coming to the negotiating table. No way China makes a deal. I was right about that. Everything the media said about that, they were completely wrong. Much of what they've said about this about this strike or has been wrong. And Trump announced this after the stock market had closed. So I was wrapping up my video. I touched on it briefly, but again, all the details. The market responded in a positive way, and I've talked about the 2 different possibilities for a long time now. I'll see those in just a moment. The Dow was up 507 points. It was up 1.19%. The S&P was up 67 points, up 1.11%. Back holding above the 6,000 area. Striking distance now. The previous peak, previous February high, it was 6,147. So we're likely going to see a new high this week. NASDAQ up nearly 1.5%, 1.43%. The NASDAQ 100 also likely about to make a new all-time high. Get those headlines, just like we saw with Bitcoin, and then we'll probably get the pullback shortly thereafter. The breakout! We get the bigger pullback. The Russell up 1.34%. The VIX dropped by 11.85%. It dropped by more than 10%. In the next 2 days, the VIX is predicting a down day for the S&P 500, 85% chance of it in the next 2 trading sessions. One other thing, this ceasefire, we got this ceasefire. Iran was begging for a ceasefire, getting clobbered. Military's in a shambles. Their nuclear program's gone. Their ballistic missiles been depleted, and many have been destroyed. Their launchers have been destroyed. Much of their launchers. The factories making the ballistic missiles have been destroyed. Israel completed their objectives early, and that's why we have a ceasefire. So again, they weren't planning on a forever war. Objective was about 2 weeks. They finished early. They did it in 12 days. That's why we have a ceasefire. These people predicting the regional war, all these people predicting World War III are now proven wrong. One country joined with Iran. China didn't do it. Russia didn't do it. All the proxies, they just sat and watched. But I'm proven correct on that now. I got a lot of flack for that too, saying it was going to end within days to just a couple of weeks. We have Powell testifying before Congress today and tomorrow. Nothing new here. Powell's still concerned about the tariffs, about different outcomes now, what could happen, what can't happen. And again, keep being told, oh, the Fed's going to cut rates, this meeting. The Fed's not going to cut until they panic. There's no reason for them to cut. Every meeting we get told, oh, the Fed's now about to cut and the market's going to take off and it's going to be 2020 and 2021 all over again. Fed goes to cut, the market will have likely already peaked, be collapsing when they do it, be ushering in the bear market. What's happened in the past? Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, please let me know that by supporting the channel. If you could take a moment to step up to the plate and help out, I would really appreciate it. I just put it all out there and just ask that you just partner with me and do what you can to help out, because I don't want sponsors. I don't want to sell you anything. They contact me constantly and I turn the offers down. I don't want to sell you anything. That's how most of the YouTube channels make their money, is with sponsorship. I don't want to sell you a bunch of stuff you don't need. Send you to gold sites that want to charge you triple commissions and these kinds of things. Don't want any part of it. If you could just take a moment to help out, I would appreciate it. Just follow the link below. It'll take you to a secured site and you could donate any amount you want or make it a recurring donation. If you do that, I thank you. Told you we could see momentum turn back to bullish, or if we broke the 20-period moving average, we could start, and momentum remain bearish, we could start seeing trend signals begin to turn bearish. That would be that lower high scenario I've talked about. Told you I thought it was more likely we'd go up here, but I told you I could be completely wrong. My original prediction is going to be correct. Told you we could see more green bars on the awesome oscillator. I think you're likely going to see that, and the MACD turn back up. And again, better define this divergence. You get a triple divergence out of both of them. And I think that will mark a top up here closer to the level that I said. I said these highs could be pointing to the next high. I think you're going to likely try to reach that level. NASDAQ is at the previous February high right now, backed off of it. You're likely going to have something here like what you had over here, okay, where we were going up. We went down briefly, and then we went back up. We made new highs, but then we topped a few days later. You're likely going to see something like that happen here. What happened over here between January and February? It has already peaked back. So again, the market is likely going to join Bitcoin. Predicted we come back up here, make a new high, back down here at the bottom, but warned I could be wrong if that lower high scenario prevails. Starting to look like on Friday, last Friday, that I might be wrong at the reversal of conditions, and I talked about that over the weekend. Just to tell you what I think most people don't. Bullish because my signals are back to bullish and my trend signals remained bullish. Momentum is flipping now back to bullish. Same is true for the NASDAQ. I expect to see green bars on the awesome oscillator. I think you get this multiple point divergence. We talked about this on the RSI, the MACD, the awesome oscillator. I warned you I could be wrong and the divergence might already be done. The trend signals start turning bearish. They have not. And again, we may even overthrow the trend line here on NASDAQ if S&P plays catch up. NASDAQ's testing the high right now. It's right at it and backed off of it. It hit it and backed off of it. Get the golden cross. So again, you're probably going to see a few days of a rally and a divergence, and we may even overthrow my trend line here. These highs pointing to the next high. I think you're going to get a top. And we could see that this week or next week. S&P finishes its 9 count. We have volatility collapsing along with oil. And again, I told you yesterday we got rejection at the 50-period moving average, gapped lower. Got the 10 back above the 20, but they're still below the 200. Rejection at the 50-period moving average. I told you we could form a larger divergence here. It closes back underneath the Bollinger Band. Eventually see the S&P top, larger pullback, or we might see the discrepancy scenario where we get a higher high with the S&P, getting a higher low with the VIX. Either scenario is possible. Get the discrepancy, or whether we get another reference point of a divergence, we'll be watching. Regardless, both of those scenarios would be bad for the S&P 500. S&P got negative divergence. We got bullish divergence here on the VIX, even though we didn't cross back below the signal line. Get your higher low on the MACD line, and we got the same thing with the RSI. Now we're pulling back. Do we end up forming formation of a higher low here? Actually see the MACD go positive, or do we roll over and end up getting the divergence and coming down below previous low and below the lower Bollinger Band? Possible that we move to new lows. Probably more likely, but again, we could have a discrepancy. It plays out that way sometimes. S&P is within striking distance of the February high, and to have volatility, you got to get back above the 50-period moving average. We're getting rejection off of it right now. And again, the whole conflict in the Middle East has remained relatively low. Like I've said, again, geopolitical issues. Sometimes they rattle markets. You get a knee-jerk reaction, or they rattle markets for a little while. Other times, the markets just shrug it off. In this, the market shrugged it off for the most part, expecting that it would not escalate into a regional war, celebrating a ceasefire, still likely going to get a pullback. What is that related to this? Maybe get a larger pullback at some point in the near future, but we're going higher right now, and I've talked about this since the bottom. Now, we saw momentum signals turn bearish, but then trend signals didn't, and I've talked about this at great length in detail. We could just bounce off the 20-period moving average and resume the advance. That's what's happening. I've talked about two scenarios. Down at the bottom with the hollow red candlestick, I predicted that we would rise up to the 200 period, pause at it, pull back, make new highs. Or I told you we would just blow right past the 200 and go make new highs. On our way to do that, but then we had this peak uncertainty surrounding the tensions in the Middle East. Diversions play out. I told you that could be it. Signals turn back to bearish. If momentum turns bearish, then you risk the trend signals turning back to bearish. See that happen. I told you because we get a lower high scenario, lower than the February peak. Here, I told you that I thought we'd go make a higher high before we get the pullback, but I told you I could be completely wrong about that. Got the lower high. Now, as we got the signals last Friday turning bearish, the odds were starting to look like maybe I was going to be wrong and we get the pullback if we took out this momentum cloud, if we took out the 20-period moving average, and if we started seeing the trend signals turn to bearish. That didn't happen. I told you it could revert right back to bullish like I did over here. Things turned bearish briefly, but then they reverted right back to bullish. Over here, things turned bearish. They reverted back to bullish, and you still went a little bit higher. We're likely seeing that here. So my original prediction looks like it's going to play out, that we're going to make new highs. And I told you these highs very well could be pointing to the next high, or if on the weekly chart we can exclude the shadow and it's a little bit lower. We may not reach that level. NASDAQ probably will. It's in with striking distance, but this dotted line right here is the previous high. NASDAQ new highs by tomorrow. About the possibility of divergences, triple divergences forming on the RSI and the MACD, and down on the stochastic. Down here, stochastic's recycling back up now, and it's likely we're going to form these triple divergences. Maybe even the RSI even moves to a new high. We'll see. Mark this as a possible, with question marks, possible wave 5 being complete here and our wave 1 being complete over here. Told you, again, this may be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have another count, too, that I'm looking at, a 1, 2, 3, a 3, a 4, and now a 5, and then we get the sell-off, or go a little higher than the higher high and try to reach this trend line, or at least attempt to. I am back to bullish now. I told you if we take out this trend line, if we see the momentum signals turn back to bullish, then we can resume the advance. Back to bullish, but I think it's going to be short-lived. Got stopped out of my short position again, flipped the trade, flipped it right back. I think the upside is going to be limited. I'm going to be selling soon, but trying to be disciplined and follow my signals. And again, my trend signals have been bullish and flipped, so there was a risk of that. We got rejection at this trend line right here with a little tiny lower high. Momentum is now flipping back to bullish, and we're back above the 10-period moving average, bouncing off the 20. So again, I think you're going to see a peak here in the coming days ahead. I think you're going to see a new high, but then I think you'll get the bigger pullback. And again, the bigger pullback is probably going to be a more shallow retracement, a Fibonacci retracement. Talked about if we get the right shoulder scenario. So that's what I think is going to happen. Told you we could get that lower high, and I could be completely wrong. Well, it looks like I'm going to be completely right about my original prediction, talking about the lower high scenario or the higher high scenario forming a top. Signals back to bullish as far as momentum is concerned. Trend signals remain bullish. So I need to be in agreement with my signals. So I turn back to bullish. There's risk here. The risk is now gone. Signals are back to bullish, but there is more risk at a little bit higher levels. Again, it's probably going to be like what happened with Bitcoin. Bitcoin came up here. The dotted line is the previous high. Bitcoin came up here, made a new high, and then went up a little bit higher, and that's probably going to get us closer to that red line there, that red trend line, these highs pointing to the next high, or close to it maybe. Broke out to a new high, and everybody said it's a breakout. It was a fake out, and Bitcoin's now been pulling back. Bitcoin signals, even though we're getting a bounce for Bitcoin, it's been down many days. Now we're getting a bounce, and signals are still bearish on Bitcoin. This is a scenario, and I told you we could have 5 here, but be the 4, 5, and so this is the one scenario that we've got the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, and now the 5. An ABC for the wave 2. This completes our first wave higher. The way you can count this, and that's putting the wave 3 here, this wave right here, up here, and here is that. That would suggest rather than being in our fifth wave, the fifth of the fifth, and it's coming to a conclusion that we're just starting the fifth wave, and that could get us closer to that red line right there that we have here. 1, 2, 3, the whole thing being 3, and I've marked that here with this count. This is 4, very similar amount of time to what the wave 2 took over here, and then the fifth wave here, and then we peak, we get a breakout, we move to a new high, and possibly move closer to this trend line or maybe reach it, and then we get that bigger pullback for an ABC. I'm longer term bullish, but back to short term bullish here. Pullback is still coming. I think we'll go much higher to whatever peak is made here. I do think we'll reach new highs. I think my original prediction will end up being correct. 50 is still below the 200. The black line's the 200, the green line's the 50, but we got the bullish golden cross today with the NASDAQ, and as I've said, P is getting a 9 count this week. It's likely these 9 counts with NASDAQ last week and the 9 count this week with the S&P likely play out. I told you they could be canceled out. Bitcoin's 9 count was canceled out. Had those 9 patterns, they only gave us a pullback. We're going higher. In the daily time frame, likely you're going to see this play out, but this is the count here that we've just completed the 4 of wave 1, and now we've just started the wave 5. The other count has us wrapping up wave 5 probably at the new high. So one of these counts I think is the most likely scenarios. Those are my 2. The people keep telling us that here comes leg down at the bear market. Back over here when they were telling us we were about to crash, I told you we bottomed. Predicted the bottom that day with that hollow red candlestick on April 7th. Signals April 7th, 8th, and 9th. I warned you even before that on the 4th that we were about to bottom. And we had evidence of that with market breadth indicators, the fear greed index, and a lot of things were warning us. The horizontal trend line, rising trend line, a lot of stuff was telling us we were about to bottom. People that told us we were about to crash here, they've been saying it all the way up. Said it here. Nothing has phased the market. Eventually, I think we're going to see this pullback. Is that the ceasefire ending or something else, whatever the catalyst may be. I don't know what the catalyst will be, may be, but I'm telling you, again, this is likely going to come to a conclusion. If we don't reach the red trend line that I previously, on my original prediction, previously predicted, you'll make a new high here because my signals are now reverting back to bullish today, and we're breaking the trend line, and the advance is now resuming. We're moving above this high. So back to bullish short term. I think we come up here and then again get that pullback. Long term bullish though on the market. Short term bullish here, but I think we'll eventually get that pullback I've been warning about. At the very close, the NASDAQ, well, first of all, we got a bullish cross of the 50 and the 200, but NASDAQ came right up to this previous peak. This peak right here was 22,222, and that's what we reached, and we began to turn down off of that just slightly. We closed at 22,190, so we came right up to that level. Again, I think you're going to exceed this level. We came right up to that level. And again, we're within striking distance of this trend line as well, which again, these highs, the December peak, the January peak, could be pointing to the next high. But as I've said, we might even overthrow that level. But my signals are back to bullish, bouncing off the 20 period moving average. I bring up the momentum cloud here. You can see we're bouncing off the 20 period in the momentum cloud, just like the S&P, gapping higher, coming up here, testing this high, and again, probably close above that level tomorrow. You got this potential diversion. So again, this could come to a conclusion in this area quickly. By a little time here, I've marked this as 3, 4, and now 5. It allows us to overthrow this area. But if we stall, maybe at the trend line here or this trend line here and where they intersect in the next few days, like the S&P, maybe the 3 is over here, the 4 here, and like I said, this whole thing being 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Both of those counts are still very much in play. Same two counts that I've talked about in the S&P 500. An Elliott wave is speculation. I think we're going to see wave 1 come to a conclusion here. I think it goes a little higher, but then I think, and so we've got the 9 count last week, right, going a little higher this week, but he's going to, be going with the S&P and the NASDAQ. It's a breakout, and you'll likely see a top and a pullback. Same divergences are possible here. Again, I talked about the diversions here, giving us the pullback to the 20 period. I told you it may be better defined. We may end up getting a larger divergence. Now we're seeing the stochastic turn back up down here. So again, I'm going to go a little higher and then get a bigger pullback for wave 2 and then a bigger rally for wave 3. I remain longer term bullish. I'm back to bullish here, but again, I think my signals are eventually going to turn back to bearish, whatever the catalyst may be. Again, often the death cross is associated. The death cross is associated with the bottom, which it was over here. Oftentimes the golden cross is associated with the top, and we'll probably pull back towards those moving averages. As I've warned, the S&P has not gotten it yet. See NASDAQ go a little higher. S&P is going to get that 9 count this week. We're going to see those 9 counts in the weekly time frame begin to play out. I've been saying in previous videos, the golden cross here ended up marking the top for Bitcoin. The bearish death cross ended up marking the bottom, and you're likely going to see the same thing with the NASDAQ. And again, those death crosses mark the bottom for S&P and NASDAQ, as we talked about back at the time. Here's the QQQ, the ETF for the NASDAQ 100. I talked about these 13 counts, told you we can go a little higher and then get a pullback or correction. We did see that happen. Told you we still have that 9 count in play on the S&P 500. NASDAQ got it last week. And overthrow that 9 count in the weekly time frame and still reach the levels I've talked about. I'm saying over and over, I could be wrong about that if we get that lower high scenario. I'm turning bearish last Friday, there was risk of that happening. Flips back to bullish today, so again, we're likely going to see the S&P now complete its 9 count this week, joining the NASDAQ. This is the QQQ. That was a daily time frame. Here's a weekly time frame, and again, we got the 9 count. Nvidia got the 9 count. If you get the 9 counts and you turn immediately, other times you go a little higher. 8 bar was the bottom of the count. The 9 bar, we had already started the reversal. Likely going to see a top here soon. Here I have the S&P weekly chart. Again, told you we could get the 9 count if the momentum could turn back to bullish happening. My original prediction is now back in play. Testing the highs today, reached the highs. backed off of them. The S&P is within striking distance of them. Again, we're likely going to see a top here this week, next week or something, and then we'll begin to get that pullback. But it's going to happen. The upside is very limited now. He had already moved 25%, and now it's going beyond that now today. It had already risen by 25%. NASDAQ well over, what is it, 3+% now. I think it's at 31% or something like that. Now it's even higher, testing the highs. I think we'll eventually come back and fill the gaps here. Probably test a 50-period moving average of 250, and the daily probably drop below those levels. Probably form a Fibonacci retracement to get a bottom. I told you we could be wrong about the higher highs that I predicted at the bottom. If the 13.9 here played out and gave us that lower high scenario, I stuck my neck out and I told you I thought it was going to be here, but told you when we shifted momentum on Friday, there was risk of the lower high scenario, and I very well could be wrong. Saw momentum shift right back. I talked about both of those scenarios. I've been talking about both of those scenarios for a very long time. My original prediction is going to end up being correct. Back to bullish now because, again, I'm trying to be disciplined to my signals. I think the upside is limited. Let me be clear about that. I've talked about down at the bottom, these highs pointing to the next high, coming up, blowing past the 200 period and going and making a new high. Looks like that's going to end up being correct. He's further away from the 200. Likely see a golden cross here in the next few days, and I'll likely joining the NASDAQ. And it could be that we get that golden cross. That's when we get the top. The 13 count now getting an override from the weekly chart as we complete that 9 count. I was watching to see which one would prevail. Would this mark a top and we start the reversal with the lower high, or will we get that 9 count and end up going and making a new high? Well, my original prediction is going to end up being correct. Regardless of whichever scenario, the lower high, the higher high, it looks like the higher high is going to be play out now. Again, continue to tell us we're moving into this bear market right now. The rally was never supposed to happen. Now I've been proven wrong. Signals have been proven correct. Again, we saw momentum turn bearish, but trend signals have remained consistently bullish for the most part. At that over the weekend when momentum flipped on Friday, and now we're seeing momentum flip right back to bullish, and we're likely going to towards the trend line from the previous highs. Trend signals have remained bullish. Are not going to last too much longer. We'll get that pullback for the higher low. So momentum flip. Now it's flipping back to bullish everywhere, but we couldn't flip those trend signals. Bars are still green. Tried to dip below the cloud, but we couldn't stay there. Talked about a larger divergence developing. Again, we had this divergence on momentum and the RSI and the awesome oscillator and the MACD getting another reference point. That's likely going to cause a top in a few days, possibly next week. We did get some red here, but now we're flipping back. We got the momentum line flipping right back to bullish. Again, we're not flipping trend signals. Warning signs of a sell-off. It was only a pullback. Likely be at a new high on the S&P very soon and a top shortly thereafter. I want to be watching these upper Bollinger Bands. I talked about getting above them and then reversing, and we could see that happen here. And signal still bullish, but now we're getting above that upper Bollinger Band. Again, we could see a reversal soon. We can hold above it for a little while. We're watching for a close back below it, but we're tagging that level and closing just above it.